Hello, everyone, and welcome to this summer webinar series, which is organized by the Society of Neuroscientists of Africa. I am Karin Gemini. I am a research fellow at the University of Würzburg, Germany, and I am very happy to host the webinar today. This initiative is a collaborative initiative with Friends in Africa, the African Academy of Neurologists, as well as the International Parkinson's Disease Genomics Consortium Africa. And with the webinar series, we aim to make neuroscience accessible to all in getting experts from a broad range of scientific backgrounds to inspire early career scientists and also increase mentorship opportunities. And today, it is my very great pleasure to have Dr. Joanne Kamens. Since 2011, Joanne is the Executive Director of Addgene, a nonprofit dedicated to facilitating and facilitate collaboration and materials sharing in the scientific community. So maybe she's going to touch a little bit today on that, what her role there is. And there is so much I can tell about Dr. Kamens, and I will try to stay within my minutes of presentation though. After receiving her PhD in genetics from the top Harvard Medical School, she worked as a group leader at BASF for 15 years. And after a very successful time there, she moved to RXi Pharmaceuticals. So this is a company specialized in siRNA, and she served there as a Senior Director of Research Collaborations. This is an outstanding woman. I read a little bit about her. She's worked in 4 different sectors, going all the way from academia through industry to nonprofit. And along the way, she has been actively advocating for women in science, and we need more of those women. She is the founder of the current Boston chapter of the Association for Women in Science. She also served on a number of other nonprofit boards, and her impact has been disruptive, driving a real change in the research climate, building bridges between academia and industry, supporting women in science, just to name that. She's received numerous distinctions, including the Pharma Voice 100, most inspiring Commander-in-Chief Award, and the very prestigious 40 over 40 2016 awards for women who are making an impressive impact. So I could go on and on and on, but I'm sure we are all eager to hear her talk today. So Joanne, thank you so much for being here. And now I'm turning the stage to you.
Thanks so much, Karen. Thank you for inviting me. As I was saying to Mosav and Karen before, I'm not traveling now with the pandemic, so I really appreciate having an opportunity to reach out to the world today. You know, when I'm back in my office here near Boston in Watertown, Massachusetts. So they've asked me to speak today about that career journey, and I'm going to try and focus on the transition points between these careers and how I moved from one to the other. I welcome questions. I think Karen will moderate the questions for the end, but I also have the chat open, and if anyone wants, sometimes I can even answer questions while I'm speaking. So feel free, we can make this very interactive. So great. Okay, so academia, that's where I did my training, where most of you or many of you are now. Then I went directly to pharma. Then to biotech, and then to nonprofit. So I made a lot of accidental choices, and what I find, but I was very, very lucky with many of my transitions and many of my decisions. One of the reasons why I give these talks is I don't want you to have to be lucky. I want you to be intentional. So I feel like scientists are trained to use this decision-making framework. You know, we make a hypothesis, we test it, and then we make a decision based on the data that we have. And we think we're very logical. And, you know, that's how we design experiments to make decisions about information and science and scientific discoveries. But when it comes to careers and professional decisions, what I find is scientists are much more, you know, it's kind of the luck of the dice. Gut feeling, feels like a good idea. I really like that paper. That sounds fun. They're really not using their data skills to gather the data that they need to make decisions about what might be a good choice or might be a good path for them or a next step, because as you can see, I've had many steps in my career. So my goal here today is to help you understand some of the things you could do to learn more so that you can make better decisions. I want to start out with the caveat that, and I spent my entire career here in the United States, almost my entire career here in Boston, in one city. So many of the things I say may not be entirely appropriate for people in an international location, but I think some of the principles will still hold the same. So I hope that you will find some helpful truth in my experience. So one of the things that's really important to understand is, while we are trainees, many of you are trainees, either postdocs or grad students or perhaps early career, unfortunately, the way our training system is set up is the mentors that you work for and the bosses that you work for, especially in academic science or primarily in academic science, don't really have a responsibility to be a good mentor to you. So one of the most important things I'll talk about is finding people who are actually on your side. Unfortunately, you have to take responsibility for these career decisions. And sometimes that may mean making a difficult decision when it comes to disagreeing with what your supervisor or your trainer wants for you. They may all want you to be in academia, but the fact is, you can't all be in academia. There aren't enough jobs. So, you know, these are just some quotes that I took from the literature. It took a lot for Virginia to set aside the feeling that she was wasting her PhD. Wasting her PhD because she went to work at a pharma company. I don't think discovering drugs is wasting your PhD. Sometimes the brightest stars in science decide to leave. Well, no one leaves science. You guys are scientists. It's not something you do, it's something you are. You don't leave science. You might leave academia, and that's a really valid choice. I'm not here to convince you to not go for an academic career. We need the academic training system. We need diverse and fantastic mentors for the next generation to train scientists. But that choice is not for everyone. And what you really want to do, is make sure that you leave your options open. So why do you need to leave your options open? I'm not here to knock any aspect of science. I loved all of these parts of my career. Here's really why you have to leave your options open and be training yourself all the time. This is just data from the US. The orange straight line at the bottom is the number of cumulative tenure track faculty positions that are awarded. And the straight blue line is the cumulative PhDs awarded. So you can see that there is a mismatch between the number of PhDs that are being awarded and the number of tenure track faculty academic positions. But this is really not as big of a problem as it looks. It's a big gap, but we have an enormous number of things that scientists need to, should be, and would really love doing in other sectors of work. So please, you know, choose. I'm trying to help in this talk, help you make a decision and choose which path might be best for you. But it's really important, if you're going to be working in science 10 years from now, 15 years from now, that you do keep your options open and do the things that'll make you flexible if you don't land that tenure track position. So part of it is really about knowing yourself. And some of the information you need is actually about you. There's nothing anyone can tell you. And you have to think about, what do you care about? What are you good at? What's really the most fun part of your job? You know, when I left the bench, I did bench work for many years, 25 some years. I loved bench science. I like to cook also. I think there's like a correlation between people who like to cook and do bench science. And then when I was in pharma, I was given an opportunity to manage a much larger group. And I knew that I would not have time to be doing my own pipetting if I managed that group and those projects. And I had to really make a decision. So I had to really think, and I talked to some of my mentors about, what is it that I like about science? Am I not going to be a scientist if I'm not pipetting anymore? It turns out what I really like about science is data. I love data. And if you manage 10 people, you get 10 people's worth of data every week. And I love that. So the transition for me was not so hard once I realized that being a scientist for me was a lot about interpreting, designing experiments, interpreting data, figuring out the best way to use the data for the next experiment. And I got to do that all the time. So I really have always enjoyed that work. Now at Addgene, I do a lot of marketing data and I get to read a lot of papers. So that's one of my favorite things. So how did I get here? Karen talked about my career trajectory, and the arrows in this slide are really the things that I'm hoping to focus on. How did I transition from one position to another? And so I'm going to view my career through 4 different lenses. And so the first lens is relationships. All of my career transitions have this in common. It was about meeting people. And you know, scientists are no more introverted or extroverted than any other field. Don't let anybody kid you. We may be geeky, but we're not more introverted than other people. But it doesn't matter if you're introverted or extroverted when it comes to building relationships. Everybody can build meaningful relationships that are helpful for their career. So how did I meet people? Well, I did network, and I really hate the term networking because it implies you know, exchanging business cards, although who knows the next time we'll exchange an actual business card or actually shake someone's hand, at least in this country. But it implies that it's just meeting people, you know, for no real reason and with no depth. The more, the better. The more LinkedIn connections you have, the better. That's not really what I'm talking about here. What I'm really talking about here is meaningful relationships that can lead to support, mutual support. So here's a study that was done with about 1,000 scientists. How many of them got their jobs by networking? It's 52% said networking. Now, if you look at this list, it's a very unscientific study because LinkedIn is the networking website, alumni network. Conferences and events are basically networking. How do you meet recruiters if you don't network? So pretty much 85% or some of jobs come from networking. Let's just call that meeting people, building relationships. And it's not the kind of thing you can do at the very last minute. You have to do it along your career because the people that can help you the most are the people that know you the best. And they won't know you the best if you haven't, you know, spent some years, you know, in the periphery, at least meeting them. So how do relationships get you jobs? They might get you a referral. Someone says, hey, I know Joanne, she might be good for this position. She, you know, might be direct contact. You know someone who actually hires you. That happens all the time in science. I'll talk a little bit more about why. You can use recruiters and agencies and job ads, but 5% of ads, these are some old data, but it's pretty true. People do get jobs from cold ads, but it's a pretty small percentage. So I want to dig a little deeper on that. How do relationships lead to jobs? So what happens in an organization, let's just say here's an example of a study that was done. 40% of hires came from referrals, whereas only 7% of the applications were from referrals. So why do people like referrals so much? So I like to tell this true story. Perhaps, you know, you interview someone and they appear to be pleasant and a normal person for a whole day of interviewing. They meet a few people, everyone likes them, you make them an offer. So you hire a technician and 2 weeks later, you're having security come and remove them from the lab because they pulled a knife on someone who borrowed their pipettes. That actually happened to me. So wouldn't it have been great if I would have had a referral that said, that guy Marcus, you know what? You know, he seems like a nice guy, but you know, he's a little bit, has a pretty bad temper. And that might have really helped me make a better decision about that hire. I didn't have a referral for him. So all I knew was that on the day of interview, he seemed very nice, and none of the references he provided gave me the information that he was a quite unstable person. So people love referrals. The minute you give a resume to a referral, it goes to the top of the pile. So how did I get my jobs? My first job was by referral. My PhD advisor was a bit involved in the beginning days of biotech. This is quite a long time ago. I'm dating myself a little. And he knew people and introduced me to 3 different organizations. I had 2 interviews. I got 1 offer, and I worked there for 15 years. In those days, there was no internet job ads. Everything was in the newspaper. So it was quite a different way of recruiting. My second job was direct contact. I was actually hired by someone that I had known for about 8 years. When I got interested in siRNA and RNAi in about 1998, when the first papers came out, I started working by collaboration with a number of people. And one of those was someone who, after I had been at Abbott about 15 years, was starting a company with Craig Mello, the Nobel Prize winner in siRNA, and they were looking for a research director. And he knew that I had been doing RNAi work at Abbott and had been leading the efforts there for the immunology group, and knew that I was qualified. And we were having lunch and he said, hey, how are things at Abbott? And I said, well, I've been here 15 years. I think it's time for me to move on. He said, hey, would you like to be our research director? I was like, yeah. And a month later, that's what I did. I gave notice about 2 weeks after that. It was actually the perfect time for me to make a move. So, and finally, when I came to Addgene, I knew the founder of Addgene. I had given her an award at a Women in Science ceremony. I actually presented her with the award, and I knew 3 of Addgene's board members. One of them was like a very good friend of mine's sister-in-law. One was a scientist I had worked with. One was someone I had worked with at Healthcare Business Women's Association. I didn't know her, but she had taken a course with me. So that interview was much less stressful. These are people who already were familiar with me and knew my work. So all of the things, and if you'll notice, I've starred 2 of these jobs. Those were never advertised. There would have been no way for me to know about those jobs if I hadn't been involved in talking with people about my career search. So some of the best jobs actually are never advertised. So you really have to watch out for building your network in order to have those types of opportunities. So everybody hates networking. Maybe a few of you don't, but most people do. So I don't advocate that you do it in the fake way that I talked about before, but just be involved in things. Be open to people. If you go into a talk, don't leave all that space. Sit next to someone and ask them, you know, what brings them to that seminar. Hopefully we'll all be sitting within 6 feet of each other soon. We are not yet doing that here in the US. You have to figure out a way that works for you to interact. So right now, maybe it's virtual coffees or virtual events, ways to begin relationships, hopefully with some visuals, because human beings build relationships by kind of meeting each other. We'll get past this COVID-19 thing, and then we'll all be able to go back to building the relationships. But meanwhile, there's things that you can do even at this time. My favorite way of networking for me has always been to join a committee, because once you meet all the people on the committee, they become your sort of lifelong connections. And it's very natural because you're actually working together. And so I have a lot more content on networking on the Addgene website, on our blog, on our YouTube site, on my LinkedIn site. So feel free to look. Addgene actually has a YouTube presentation called Not Networking 101, which goes into some detail on tactics for networking for about 40 minutes. So if you want to dig deeper on those skills, I don't have time to do it today, but please watch that webinar. It's recorded and on our YouTube site at Addgene. The most important things about networking is you can't wait until you need a job, because then you're sort of desperate. It's like dating. You don't want to be looking for a relationship and it's sort of desperate. You want the right person to just, you know, find them naturally without feeling desperate about it. Same thing with job hunting. If you feel too anxious about it, it's much harder to meet people in a relaxed way. If something feels creepy, don't do it. Like this guy here on the train. Use your gut instincts to tell you when it's not right to bug somebody or to pursue them too much. Be interested in people. I'm super interested in people. All of my work in diversity has taught me that there's so many interesting things to learn about people. And so be interested in them. Don't look over their shoulder to meet the next person. Be interested in the conversations you're having. If you go to an event and you meet one person that's nice to talk to, you have been successful at that event. It's quality, not the quantity of people that you meet. And you don't have to network with people you don't like. People ask me that all the time. Oh, this important person, I should meet them. Really? Because they're not that nice. So meet people that you get along with, that you have things in common with. Okay, so the second lens has to do with trying new things. And I have to say, I have been pretty bold about raising my hand. So especially when I was at Pharma, when there were a lot of different types of opportunities and resources for education. Hey, do you want to take a course on, you know, how to manufacture drugs? Yes, I would like to learn about that. Would you like to take a course on managing people? Yes, I would like to learn about that. Would you like to manage a project with collaborators in Japan? Yes, I think I could do that. So there's a lot of times when it's a little unnerving to do that, but really raising your hand to volunteer for challenging opportunities and educational opportunities, that's the best way, I think, to move your career and add new skills. Scientists, we are lifelong learners. That's even the definition of scientist to me. I'm a lifelong learner. As long as I'm learning and growing, I'm going to be happy. It's one of the things I like to do here at Addgene is make sure people have those opportunities for learning and growth, because that's what's going to make them stay and be at Addgene for a long time. And that's very, very valuable, keeping people. So I'll tell you a little bit about Addgene. So I had to really swallow a lot of my inner doubts because, you know, I'm a scientist, and I even had dinner with a friend of mine about 10 years ago, one of my friends and mentors, and She said, you should be the CEO of a company. And I was like, no, I'm never going to be CEO, maybe CSO, but you know, that's not my thing. I'm a scientist. And here I was being given the opportunity to be the executive director, which is like the CEO of Addgene. And so I really had to be bold and say, I can do that. I have the skills. I have learned the skills in all of my other career opportunities. So one of the things I was right for was focusing on collaboration. I've always been a very international collaborator. I'm very interested in international communication, diversity, and inclusion for many years. And so being at Addgene, where this is a core value because we serve scientists all over the world, is something that I really appreciate. So Addgene is here to help scientists share materials and the data associated with them and other useful information. We're a nonprofit, so I volunteered my whole life, but this is the first time I've been paid to do nonprofit work, and it's a great fit. I love being in nonprofit. Fantastic career choice, by the way, and I'm happy to talk more about that. So Addgene, when I first got to Addgene, we were founded in 2004, but when I came, we were distributing about 200 items a day, and now we're distributing about 800 items a day, give or take. Right now with the pandemic, things are a little slow, but in general, that's where we're at. We have over 80,000 samples in the repository, thousands of depositing labs. We're almost at 5,000, and we just distributed to our 101st country, which was Uganda. And so we distribute to tens of thousands of scientists all over the world. Mostly what we distribute are plasmids. That's our core original offering. But now we have plasmids in different formats. We also have a prepared viral vector service, which is quite pertinent for the neuroscience community. We have tons of neuroscience resources, especially in AAV vectors and information on the website and pool libraries. So quite a lot of new stuff coming. We just launched a cloning grade DNA service, which you can find out more on the website. That's a new service. And we're always doing new things, and new things will come. So we do share all over the world. We have offices here in Watertown, Massachusetts, and near London at LGC in the UK. And then we have distributors in a few countries, India, China, Korea, and Japan. And I thought you might also be interested in which African countries we had distributed to. So here's the list so far. These are the countries that have requested from Addgene. We don't have very many deposits, so I'm going to talk about depositing for a second. So one of the things Addgene is also involved in is providing reproducible data by sequencing and quality. And so we're part of the reproducible open science movement, if you will. So why join the sharing community? It's great visibility for your lab. You would be shocked to see how many scientists want to request your stuff. My favorite reason is that top freezer might be your freezer, and the bottom freezer is what our freezer looks like, and everything is barcoded and it will never be lost. Also, if you move around in your career, it's not so easy to take your plasmids with you, both by the intellectual property and physically, but if you deposit your published plasmids at Addgene from your papers, they'll be here forever, and you can always refer people to get them here. We're really, really good also at international logistics. We can ship everywhere. We're just really great at working with plasmids and everything that entails. So think about it. If you are writing papers and using plasmids in your work, please think about depositing them. I would love to see your work featured, especially from more African institutions. It's an area where we're doing outreach now. We actually had a fellow at Addgene from Nigeria last year, which was fantastic and really helped us learn a lot about science in Africa. We also have tons of free educational resources open for everyone. All of our material is open. The blog is fantastically popular with science and career information. We have great ebooks, as I mentioned, fantastic videos on YouTube, especially we have a lot of entry-level scientist training videos, like very simple things like how to pour plates to more sophisticated things like how to pull a band in a viral preparation. So tons of information. We also do technical service. We answer your questions. You just need to call us, and one of our PhD molecular biologists will help you choose what you need for your experiments or figure out how to arrange a deposit or any of those things. So the Addgenes as a nonprofit, they do this work because they love it. They love helping you. They love being experts at what they do. I will just say that during the COVID crisis, we were in a great position to help the scientific community. So we shut down for about 2 weeks to figure out how to work safely in this country in March. But we opened up quickly because deposits were pouring in with COVID-19 and coronavirus related materials. We've already distributed over 8,000 materials at least in that, probably more. And we're collecting really tons of resources for scientists using molecular biology to study COVID-19. So check that out if that is an area that you are interested in. I'm not going to talk about our neuroscience resources because they are vast. It's one of our largest areas of focus of the collection. In October, and Addgene Eric Perkins, one of our product managers, an Addgene veteran, he's been at Addgene longer than I have, is going to talk very specifically about all of the resources we have at Addgene. So stay tuned for his talk. He's also a great speaker and would also answer questions about his really cool career. He's been at Addgene doing cool things for a really long time. He started out as a technical service scientist, and now he's the head of our product team that supports our software team. Also at Addgene, we are sometimes hiring, not so much right now, but it's a great career site to keep track of. Also, you can follow us on social media. We often post about open positions. These are things that scientists, masters, PhD, and some bachelors do at Addgene. Some of them do bench work, but a whole lot of them do other things. So if bench work is not for you, or if you're ready to move into another area of science, nonprofit can be a fantastic area for a science career. It's proved so very much for me and for many, many Addgenes. So our mantra is, how can we help? What can we do to help the scientists around the world? And for that, we have a big focus on trying to mirror the scientists around the world. And I'll talk more about diversity in a second, because that is really one of Addgene's most important core values. Because we serve a diverse world, we have to be diverse in our thinking and in our work. So when it comes to professional development, how did I get here? Well, you don't start managing 100 people on day one. I managed one person when I started at BASF, and it went well. And then they gave me another person, and that went okay. And then they gave me a third person. So sometimes scientists think like they're going to be expected to manage 20 people when they get right out of their degree. And sometimes that does actually happen. I hope that you have done some training before, because just like any other scientific knowledge or skill, managing people is in fact a skill that you can learn. I also, as I mentioned, took a lot of opportunities to learn things through courses, through conferences, through extended education. And also I did a lot of volunteer work. And volunteering is a really good practice for doing leadership roles, because managing people without authority, when you don't pay them, you don't really have any authority. So managing people like that can be a very good practice for doing other kinds of management and leadership roles. So I did a lot of volunteer work, and I may also mention that a little more later. So that's my second take, is working on professional development in every stage helped me also make that transition to the next stage. If it weren't for the things I learned through RXi, I would never have been qualified to work at Addgene, even though I made hundreds of plasmids in my career before then. There were many other things that I needed to know. So how can you get those plus skills? I don't call them soft skills, because there's nothing soft about these skills. Whether you are academia or non-academia bound, depending, whatever your career is going to be, these skills are going to help you no matter what. So it's not diverting from your academic career by working on these different areas. So where can you do this? You could do it at your universities by taking courses, not just working at the bench, but sitting in on courses. Sometimes you can audit courses at the universities that you're at. I wish I had done more of that when I was a grad student. You can get involved with professional organizations like this one, which is a great way to learn and to network. Social media has offerings. There are massive online courses. There are many, many ways to develop plus skills and to learn about many, many aspects of scientific careers. Addgene has a fantastic science career guide. It's a free downloadable ebook. Check out the blog.addgene.org, and you can get it there. So for technical knowledge, you might want to become a thought leader in an area. So for example, when I was doing RNAi in immune cells, I was one of the first people doing that work. And it was crazy because it was very hard in the beginning. We didn't know which sequences worked. We didn't know how to deliver the RNA to the cells. There was a lot of development to be done. But because I focused on that area, I got invited to speak at conferences. And it's the way I actually got my next job, was becoming a bit of an authority in that one area. So, you know, if you develop something new, you are the owner of that technology. You know more about that science than anyone else. And so that's a good way to demonstrate your leadership in science. Maybe you can review publications. It's a good way to learn about the field if your supervisors recommend you. I don't like blind reviewing where you don't get credit. You should get credit, but it's a great way to demonstrate your technical knowledge. Maintain a website, start a blog, invite other people to speak and go speak elsewhere. Practicing speaking is a great way to sound like a technical expert. Communication is super important for science. I don't need to tell you that. There are many, many ways you can practice your communication skills. Also writing, the faster you can write like a first draft, the better. So practicing rapid writing, you know, you're just going to be more successful. There's so much writing that has to be done in science. I write an internal blog for Addgene, and I set a timer and I spend 30 minutes on it, and I publish it after 30 minutes. So I'm sort of training myself. It's not perfect writing. It probably needs proofreading, but at least it's fast. And so practicing those skills, getting people to edit for you and check your English. I am so lucky that English is my native language. That is generally the language of international science. So practicing your English writing and speaking is super important. Another thing about communication, many jobs these days, especially now during the pandemic, your first interview might be a phone call. Zoom is a little better. You can understand the person's face. You can see here I'm providing captions on the slides in case it's hard for you to understand me. I know I speak too quickly. But one problem with a phone interview is if your English isn't great, or if your understanding of English is harder with no one's face, you may have trouble with the interview, not because you're not a good candidate, just because that setup for communication is harder than in person. I really feel sad when people don't have the opportunity for jobs because of that. So it's a good kind of thing to practice is your spoken English, and also on the phone, which is just sort of a little tip. Managing and leading people. Again, a lot of when you leave science, you're quite senior in your career. If you've done a postdoc, you're 12 years out from college. That's a lot of education and experience. You may be expected to manage people quickly. It is a skill you can learn. Don't think that it's going to just be natural and you're going to know how to do it. It's not always obvious. For me, the definition of leadership is sort of management with initiative. And we love to see at Addgene things on people's resumes that show that they started something or led something or really initiated some kind of activity and led it, because that really shows a drive for the workplace, which is what employers are looking for. And finally, collaboration and teamwork. So when I talk with non-academic hiring managers, a lot of times what they say is that academic scientists work for a long time, mostly by themselves, maybe with their advisor, maybe one other scientist, maybe you are involved in a collaboration, but your day-to-day work, a lot of it is by yourself. And that's not how the rest of the world works. The rest of the world works by collaboration and in groups. And so what we want to see on resumes is that people have demonstrated they can do that kind of collaborative work, because that's how we work at Addgene, very, very collaboratively. So demonstrate your teamwork, demonstrate collaborations, and there's a lot of ways to put things on your resume that look attractive. And when I say put on your resume, I also mean that you gain the skills, that you have the experience. Working with people can be a challenge. The more experience you have doing that as a collaborating team member, the more ready you will be for other types of jobs. And also, it's great for academia too. None of these skills are non-academia specific. Okay, so the third lens. First lens was relationships. The second lens was learning and professional development. And for me, the third lens is diversity. It was, as Karen mentioned, I don't even know if she knew I was going to talk about this today, but this has been an overarching theme through my whole career and has had a huge influence on my career in so many ways. From the first day that I woke up in pharma and realized that, oops, sorry. Sorry, one sec. I just lost my sharing for a minute there. Sorry, one second. Let me just get back on track here. Present. Maybe it just didn't know I was. Okay. Okay. Karen, can you see my slides still? I just want to make sure.
Yes, yes, we can see your slides.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Something happened with my computer. Thank you very much.
That's okay.
Great. Okay, so I'm talking about this third lens of working on diversity in science and in the world for that matter, although I was a scientist, so most of my work was focused on science. And I woke up one day in a meeting. I didn't wake up, I just realized like the light bulb went off, as we say here in America. You know, I had been in meetings all week and there had been not one other woman. And I didn't know what happened. In my graduate class, we were half women. What happened? I never had any discrimination. I had a great advisor in graduate school. He didn't treat me any differently. My parents never treated me differently. I just didn't really understand. And I'm a scientist, so I started researching and realized the extent of the problem that women were facing. And this was early days. This is a very hot topic now. It was not so hot, you know, say 30 years ago or 22 years ago or so when I got involved. So, you know, I've really focused a lot on I'll talk a little bit about some bad players like harassment and real problems, but that's not really the only problem. The problem is with all of us. We all have biases that we don't even realize we are carrying. So this is one of my favorite cartoons. I don't know how many of you women on this call are postdoctoral fellows, but I don't know if you know that the word fellow refers to a young man. Even the term that we use for postdoctoral scientists studying, at least in this country often, it's a boy word. We are so gendered, and there are, you know, gender is now recognized as not even being binary, and we're so focused on gender and discriminating against anyone who's other than basically a white male, which is the problem. And these biases are things we learn from media, we learn them from birth, we learn them from families. Everyone has them. It doesn't matter what color you are, what gender you are, how old you are. We all carry some of the same biases toward older people, non-white people, non-male, you know, or agendered or different gendered people. So it's a huge problem in science because, of course, we need representation from everyone to do good science. And so, as I mentioned, you know, there are harassers, and I hope that not many of you have come in contact with someone like this guy, Jeff Marcy. He was probably caused hundreds of women to drop out of his field. And he was a serial harasser. Thousands of people knew about it, and it took years for them finally to get him out of his position. It was just really, it's an appalling story. But that's not really what I'm talking about as the continuing problem. We can get rid of those people. But it's people like this that just make sort of offhand comments about, in this case, women, but all kinds of comments, these microaggressions that you're starting to hear about that really cause a huge amount of damage to science. I mean, this guy, you know, Tim Hunt, if any of you are in the UK, he's a very famous, you know, Royal Academy, he's out of the Royal Academy member, where he said in an interview, you fall in love with women, they fall in love with you in the lab, and when you criticize them, they cry. And that was his reason for advocating for single gender labs, read all male labs. And when a reporter asked him, come on, you didn't really mean that, he doubled down and he said, well, I just was telling the truth. I did really mean that. We can't have people like this leading science. By the way, when he was married, he had an affair with a woman in his lab who he subsequently married. And, you know, that person stuck by him through this entire scandal. There's problems with that, so many problems with that. You know, was that maybe harassment? Who knows? But certainly it's microaggression and certainly it's bias. This other guy, Dario Mastropieri, he's on his Facebook page. His whole lab is friends with him on Facebook. This happened a few years ago, and before he could take it down, someone clipped it from Facebook. He says, wow, this SFN conference in New Orleans, the supermodel types are completely absent. There's a high concentration of unattractive women here. Are unattractive women particularly attracted to neuroscience? No offense to anyone. I mean, come on. Believe it or not, this guy still has a lab. There's still women in his lab. Who would choose that? So one of my messages is do some research. Don't choose those people. You shouldn't give your work to them. They don't deserve you, basically. So you really want to look for mentors that are ethical. We have a lot of things we need to do to fix these problems, but at the very start, just choose ethical labs where the advisors are not racist, misogynistic, or, you know, phobic about anything. And then they're open to support anyone through any type of career. That's hugely damaging to science. So these implicit biases is what I have focused on in my sort of observational work and speaking and training. Everyone at Addgene goes through an unbiasing training. It's required. We want everyone to be aware that we talk about these things here. And we've been doing this for a long time, long before there was this, in the United States, this racial watershed moment where people are finally talking about it. I've actually gotten more calls about doing implicit bias talks in the last 3 weeks than I have in the last 3 years. So hopefully people are waking up. This is the thing we need to work at aggressively. Leaders need to pay attention to it all the time. So in science, we don't just have a gender problem, we have racial problems. Black STEM workers are most likely to say they've experienced discrimination at work due to race. And most of them have experienced some form of discrimination in their jobs. This was quite a large study from 2017. But it's just pervasive. Very, very few people, few women and few scientists of any color have not experienced some form of discrimination in their workplace. We are losing out on most of the talent that we could be attracting to do successful science. It's a huge problem. So I started working on this, as I mentioned, while I was at BASF, kind of between, so Abbott purchased BASF in the middle of my time there. That's why it's 2 companies, 1 job. And I founded a diversity council at Abbott, which was, again, quite unusual for the day. It was quite a fight. It was quite interesting. I went around to the company to gather people, and I had proposed it, and HR told me that I could, if I could get enough people to participate, I would be allowed to have this meeting. We'll see what happened. So I went around, and I'm Jewish, so I got someone who was Muslim and Hindu and Catholic and Protestant and atheist. And I went to literally I only knew 1 Black person at my company. And I went to him and said, hey, could you be on my diversity council? And he said, yes, because I have to be, because every time they do a photo shoot for publicity, they make me put a lab coat on and pretend to be in the lab. And I had one friend who was gay, and I went to him and I said, you know, can you be on my diversity council? You're the only one. And he said, no, I'm not. And so for me, that group of people, most of whom I'm still friends and colleagues with and still in my network, was a formative experience because I had a safe place to talk about difference, all kinds of differences. And we really became a close group of people committed to this subject. As you can see, I did much, much more work in this area. I'm doing it all the time, advising other organizations about diversity, a lot of women in science groups, but other types of groups as well. It's something that I believe really strongly in. Definitely following your passions is a great way to build your network. And this leads kind of to my last lens, which is life. So science is a huge part of our lives. And if you are a person who can just do your bench work and that's all you need from your life, and relationships aren't important, and you don't have any outside interests like diversity or marathon running or whatever your outside interests are, then you can just do your science. But for the most of us, that's not going to work. We have to have life too. And you deserve to have life. And I speak to so many scientists who put off their lives in order to do science, saying, I'll do life later. And I don't think that's good for our mental health, and I don't think it's practical. So I had my first baby in graduate school. I got married, you know, fairly young, but we were ready to have children. It was actually a good time. My husband was also a student. We were a little bit poor, but we were okay. And we managed to do that because we were equal partners in this. I have great admiration for single parents. That's enormously difficult. I hope you have family to support you. In my case, we as partners raised our children. I had a son in grad school, and then I had my daughter a couple years after I started working in pharma. So you really have to find room for life. And so what does that mean? I have these 10 commandments of work-life negotiation. You can go look up my blog on the Addgene blog about these details. But it really means you have to really be negotiating between work and life, and create community to help. Think about things that are going to make you and your relationships mentally good and mentally well. So I have a whole talk on this subject and a whole blog that you can read if you want to get in my thoughts about life, but you have to have your own thoughts about life. How are you going to balance it? But I think the most important thing about life, and here's my complicated story, you know, I have a lot of hobbies. I read a lot of fiction during this pandemic because I'm not traveling. I have so much more time. I already met my annual reading goal and it's only August. I love to travel when I can. I like crossword puzzles. I'm a level 40 Pokemon Go player. I'm happy to friend you if there's any Pokemon Go players out there. We have a big team here at Addgene. It's super fun. So I have a lot of things. Now my parents are needing my help more. I have to balance that. And so, you know, these are things that should be part of your life. Human beings can do science and can do life. So what does that have to do with? It means choosing good labs. Choose mentors that are going to support a reasonable amount of work. Choose a career that's going to give you a control over your time if that's important to you. And you know, don't let anyone guilt you into not doing the normal things like sleeping and eating and being healthy and exercising. We as scientists know how important it is to get exercise. It's super important. You can't just sit at a desk or even just work at the bench all the time. You have to do that for your mental health. So be bold about that and look for advisors. Okay, so what the goal is, I think, is to be in the zone. Sometimes work is great, home is also great. You choose a career, whatever it is, academia or whatever it is, that makes you feel really fantastic some of the time. Sometimes it doesn't even feel like work. That's the blessing of a science education and science career, is that we love science, we love what we do, and a lot of times it's just makes us dance. It's super fun. So you should be treating this like a research assignment. Get data, always be learning. Try not to whine about science too much. Academics tend to be whining a little bit. It's not so whiny outside of academia. So I can talk more about that if you want. And meet people, build relationships, because those are where your opportunities are going to come from. Okay, so best of luck on your career journey. I'm happy to take questions, and I already see some coming through in both the chat and the Q&A. Karen, do you want me to let you ask the questions?
Can do that so that you pull out the amazing question. Thank you so much. This is impressive, and I have to admit, I've heard several talks from different people from different backgrounds about career, and most of the people always forget to tell us that we have to live too. And I find it really great that you are showing how you actually manage all those things that belong actually to life. And yeah, I just found it really, really nice, really great. Maybe I have my own questions, but since people are asking questions, sure, maybe we'll take them first.
Okay, great.
And the first one is, how do I network with people who are not in my field? Considering I am in an institute that does basic science, for example, and my circle is limited to academics, and at most maybe biotech startups, what would be an ideal way to expand this circle as a PhD student who is starting out?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, you know, what I say is everything is networking. So I don't know where you're located, so it's hard for me to give specific advice. You'd have to look on Google. But for example, in Massachusetts, we have a mass bio organization, which is a bio and pharma, and they have all kinds of events and networking groups. There are a lot of diversity groups, women in science groups, and groups about diversity that you could get involved in. You'll probably meet people that are working in other fields from academia. Alumni of your lab. I have a blog on the Addgene blog called How to Do an Informational Interview. If anybody in your lab has ever gone to a different career, set up an online coffee with them and ask them how they did it. You'll find out about all kinds of interesting connections that way. If you watch my video on Not Networking 101, I have a ton of tactics for how to do this, like actual suggestions. It would take me like 40 minutes to redo that whole thing. So I urge you to watch that video. You know, it's definitely worth making time getting involved in organizations that have scientists not in academia.
Well, this is great. And what I wanted to say is that you've been writing, also tagging the blog address, and people will be able to review or to watch again this talk, and they'll be able actually to have the link and to find you then on the web. Another question here from Anumit. He's asking, will doing an industrial postdoc make transition easier than going directly from a PhD?
Yeah, I get this question a lot. So I never did a postdoc, but that was because I had connections that allowed me to make a direct move into industry. It's really all about who you know. One of the problems is that grad students, as the question before, they don't usually know a lot of people outside of academia. They may not even know what they want to do next. So they don't spend the time, they don't have the time maybe, or the resources if their universities are not good about giving them those opportunities. So the reason why you need to do a postdoc is because you haven't met people as a grad student. You need to use your postdoc to do that work, to start meeting people in other fields. I think that if you can get an industrial postdoc, they're hard to get and they're quite rare, but if you can get one, it's a fantastic transition, because then you're going to meet all these people outside of academia that are going to see you work. Of course, don't get me wrong, all these extra things I'm talking about, you always have to do good science. I just want to remind everybody, so people always tell me, oh, I'm giving a talk, but it's not important. Every time you speak publicly, it's important, because every time you speak, it could be a job talk. This could be a job talk for me. Someone listening today could someday give me a job, right? So when you are working, you are always being, you are always making relationships. So do good science, and you can do it in an industrial postdoc, and it will give you a lot of opportunities to move out of academia. I do want to caution you, though, that going into pharma as your first job is just one thing. There are hundreds of jobs. I mean, I could start listing them. I wouldn't stop for an hour. It's not just doing bench work in pharma that has to be your next job. But that is, if that's what you want to do, doing an industrial postdoc is a great way to make that transition. I hope that answers your question, Anumid.
Well, this is a great answer. So we have to aim for excellence at any time. So because at any time, that opportunity can be on the table to make that successful transition. And I guess linking on that question, I had a question on mind, and that is mainly regarding how long, is there a too late time to transition? This is, I don't know if I'm saying it well, like some people stay within academia for a long time, or do a permadoc and eventually figure out, okay, I won't land this professor position and I'm looking to transition. Is there a timeline to do this?
Is a really good question. In another one of my talks, I kind of talk a little bit more about this issue of timing. So this is going to be a little hard for some people to hear, but if you stay too long as a postdoc in academia, like more than 4, 5, 6 years, let's say more than 6 years. I even think that's too long, but let's say more than 6 years. When you start to apply for jobs, what it looks like on your resume is that you failed at academia and you wanted to be in academia, but you just didn't make it. It's a lot harder to message your exit at that point. But if you leave academia after a good 3-year postdoc where you met people, made connections, and then you started to look for other types of jobs, you look like that was your plan all along. So staying too long can be a problem. There are ways to work with resume coaches to figure out better ways to message that in your resume so it doesn't look like, you're just a failed academic. I don't call it failing. I just think you need to get up and go. I don't know how that translates well, but you need some energy to get your career moving. Also, we're old. Like my kids left college and got great jobs. Neither of them went for grad. Well, my daughter's getting a master's now, but she's been working for 3 years, they went and made money, got jobs, traveled the world. I was broke for years as a graduate student, and I started a family, but many people wait on starting a family. Your life is waiting a lot of the time. How long are you going to do that? Also, academic career like that, you may have to move around a lot and move yourself, move your family. So I would say if you thought more in graduate school about where you wanted to end up, you could make that transition earlier and get your life moving. Also, one thing about taking a job, it is a big decision to leave academia because it's hard to get back on the track. It's not impossible, but it's hard. But I would say that when your next job, when you leave academia, it's just your next job. It's not your last job. So if you don't like it and it wasn't the right thing, you can do a different thing. So, you know, so people get very nervous about that first job, that first step. Just get a job, try something out. Maybe you'll love it. You don't know, you know. And if it's not the right thing, then you'll get another job. People move jobs all the time. So, you know, I think the more early you think about it, though, then you won't get stuck in that postdoc forever where you can't move on and get more stability in your life. Does that answer your question, Karen?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think in the background, there's always a myth as an academic. I do have that bias too, because I'm working within academia, that when you move to the industry, you won't have this great freedom anymore. So you will have, so this is the question, right?
Yeah, totally wrong. I loved being in industry science. I loved working with the team. Come on, how can you not? I mean, the patients are waiting. There is so, what would we be doing without pharma now with this COVID-19 pandemic? Where would we be, right? Amazing science going on in both academia and non-academia, right? Also, what if you're not great at the bench? Maybe you want to be in science law or science communication or business development. We need scientists. We need more scientists in government. Please go into government. We need more scientists in policy, right? Please run for office. I'm actually going to get to vote for a epidemiologist in my district for Congress.
This is great.
Yeah, I'm so excited to vote for more scientists. We need more science in government. So maybe, you know, you be bold. There are some great things you might not know about. Not everyone belongs in academia. So it's not for everybody. It's not everyone's strength. So, but the next is about academia.
I'll pick one of the questions in the audience again from Berano. And he's saying, he's saying, thank you for the presentation. I want to ask a question. What would you specifically recommend to undergraduate students who want to stay who want to be in academia?
Yeah,
what would you recommend?
Yeah, so I mean, I think if you want to be in academia, you know, you want to move through a regular PhD and then a postdoc. I didn't do that, so I'm not the best person to learn from. But I think the most important thing there is going to be choosing your training labs. You want to choose mentors that are very, very successful in their academic careers, both how they manage and treat their lab, how they raise money, how they manage their science, and how they interact with the administration and the community. And you want to choose them very deliberately because they're who you're going to learn from. Especially your postdoc lab. A postdoc should be to teach you how to be successful in academia. So you want to choose an advisor that can raise money, that can get grants, that, you know, has a lot of active projects. I also have a webinar called How to Choose a Lab, and this is integrated into that a little bit. So really it's going to be about being intentional about choosing your training labs. That's my best advice for that one. Yeah.
So this is more like a mismatch question, but I ask it anyway. So Shamai is a neurologist. He's working in academia, and his wish would be to work in the lab, so running basic science as a neuroscientist. How to make this every time, or how every time he tried to apply, he get rejected because of his clinical background, basically. And what would be your advice?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know about exactly what field you're in or where you are, what you're doing, or, you know, it's all about meeting people. So my advice for you is to reach out to people doing what you want to do and learn from their experience what they did to get where they are. You know, it's finding the people who have taken the same path and being a little bold about asking them for advice and information. So you really need to build your network. That's how you're going to get opportunities. And so, again, learning a little bit more about networking from our blog or from other online sources, I think might help you with that transition. So what are some job opportunities at Addgene in London? It is a very small office. It's just 2 talented scientists, Ben and Klaus. But watch if you're ever looking for, you can follow our career site. We don't hire there very often. But thank you for asking, and we would love to have you follow our blog and our career posts and see if we do have openings. We love to hire scientists from all over the world. So, okay, there were a couple questions in the chat.
they were transferred then to the
Transferred, okay.
Q&A.
Right.
Yeah, but I have a couple of questions still about strategy. This is more like a question that people always ask also. You're a PhD student, you're pretty sure you want to go transition to industry. So what would be your advice moving to a small company first, a biotech, a startup, or running for a big company?
Yeah,
At
so
the very beginning, what is the best strategy there?
I don't think it matters. I think it matters that you do something that that you get a first job, because that first one is hard to get. You use your relationships to, so they're just different, and you can move between them. And it's not, I don't think one is better than the other. So in a big company, your job is probably going to be more prescribed, and whereas in a small company, you kind of get to do everything. So, if you like that fast pace and that constant learning, I loved being at a startup. I've been at 2 now. I've been at Addgene and RXi, and I get to do a ton of different interesting things, whereas in pharma, I was a molecular biologist. I cloned things. I got to do more people management, but it was a prescribed kind of path. So that's a little different. I would say the hours in a larger, this isn't even just pharma and biotech, Karen. It's like small company, large company. It could be small law firm, large law firm. It could be small consulting group, large consulting group, small nonprofit, large nonprofit. These are just sort of big, large differences. I mean, small, large differences, not pharma, I would say that large organizations talk a lot about diversity and inclusion, but they're not yet very effective at really being successful. Whereas on a small team, if they're talking about it and you can see that the team is diverse, you have a better chance of being better included. Actually, this is anecdotal. I don't have data on that. There's still issues with women and underrepresented groups advancing in small companies to leadership roles, but the times may be changing, so maybe that's good. So I think in a large company, you have a lot of resources to learn within the company. And at a small company, you may have to reach outward to find those learning resources, but you're going to have to do so many things because there's not a lot of people to do them. So like, for example, when I moved to biotech, I was pitching, I was doing business development, I was managing the bench, I was doing the purchasing, I was looking at all the clinical data, I was getting ready we went public on the stock exchange. I had to do some work for that. Like it's all learning. It was all new and interesting, right? So I think, really, it doesn't really matter. And again, if your network is strong, you can move from a small company to a large company and try that out at another time. And so I don't have good advice there. It's more the specific job and boss that you pick than where it is. Yeah.
This is great. Well, thank you for your answer. I guess I have two more personal questions. In your talk, you touched a little bit about your work on advocating for women and those unknown biases. Well, those biases are real, and most people think that when you appear in a presentation wearing a skirt, then you won't be taken seriously, or high heels, or well, there are so many unknown biases out there. And I guess my question to you is that you made it to the top management, and for all the women out there, what would be your advice in terms of how you present yourself? Because sometimes the bias starts by how you present yourself and how you talk to people, or should you be bossy, or those things?
I don't think people should be different than what they are. We need to change our minds so that what's a leader is not just, one picture of a leader, right? We need a leader to be anyone. And I actually have found in my own experience that leaders in my company can be from anywhere at any level. And so we really, when we have biases, and the business case for this is you will not get the best people in a job. You won't get them if you can't see past your biases. And so being able to see past your biases is how you're going to see the best talent from all the parts of the world. I don't think you should change yourself. I don't think you should be afraid to talk about your family and your children at any job. If it makes people uncomfortable, maybe you don't want that job. You know, it's not legal for them to ask you, but, you know, I mean, I don't think you should have to hide who you are. I don't think, you know, I think people should try not to judge, you know. Now, does that mean that you should wear like a sexy Saturday night outfit to an interview? No, that does not mean that. That's not professional on any stretch of the imagination. So I have had some issues at the company. We have a pretty modest company. We're quite international. There's people here of all religions, of all backgrounds. And we dressed modestly. We just do. If you look around, that's how you see people dress. And every so often someone comes and, you know, they don't really fit in that way. It can be an awkward conversation. That's all fine. You know, I think you should be yourself. I think you should be the leader that you are. You will continue to learn skills. I think what you should do, work where people appreciate you. That's really what you need to do, is to move to places that appreciate who you are for what you can accomplish, and do good science, and then you'll have opportunities. Yeah, it doesn't work to pretend you're something different. You are whatever gender you are. You are the person you are. It doesn't affect your work at all. You can be all these things, you know. Not a very easy answer, but true. No. That's how I feel about it.
I'll take a very last word from you, because we have a lot of early career scientists all over the world listening to this talk. And I guess what would be your your advice to them, like how to be successful, no matter what they choose, how to be successful?
Yeah, I mean, it really goes back to that meeting other people and building a mentor, building a group of mentors. So everyone you meet can be a mentor to you. They don't have to be older than you. They just have to be different than you. I mean, your peers around you are mentors. Just learn from the people around you and build relationships. That is the best advice I can give. You can't just put your nose down and do your pipetting and be successful in any career, even academia. So, you know, I will learn from you guys about the community of neuroscientists in Africa. We will learn from each other. And so what I would say is have that as a focus, and you will do well in your career.
All right, Joanne, thank you for your generosity. We learned a lot with you today, and it was really great to have you. Thank you so much for coming here.
Thanks so much. Everybody watch Eric in October. He's going to give a great talk.
We'll do that.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.